A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Anne Nwawado. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Death toll from Hurricane Melissa climbs to 49, with many people still missing. Landslides and flash floods kill 14 in central Vietnam as rescue operations push forward. Plus, U.S. Senate passes resolution to block global tariffs of governments as it shut down and reaches 1 month mark. Once again, welcome to the world today. Hurricane Melissa has now killed some 49 people. The figure is expected to rise as search and rescue operations continue across the trail of destruction. The storm left in its wake in the northern Caribbean. In Jamaica, Information Minister Dana Dixon says that at least 19 people have died. Authorities are still struggling to deliver aid to hard-hit areas. Entire communities have been left marooned and others completely flattened, with devastating floods reported across western regions. Electricity remains out for most of the island as people struggle to salvage homes and their belongings from floodwaters and mud. Officials have confirmed that the hurricane also killed at least 30 people in Haiti, with 20 others missing. The nation was not directly hit, but suffered days of torrential rains from the lumbering storm. At least 14 people have been killed and 8 others missing after torrential rains caused landslides in central Vietnam. The worst hit area is Tra Tan commune in Quang Nam province, where flooding and landslides swept away homes and cut off entire communities. More than 128,000 homes have been submerged across 90 communities since Sunday. Authorities are saying at least 30 landslides in the mountainous district of Nam Charmi has blocked roads and isolated residents. Rescue teams have been deployed to evacuate families from high-risk zones and deliver food, clean water, and medical supplies to those cut off by the damage. Meanwhile, a powerful rainstorm triggered flash floods across New York City, submerging homes and vehicles on the streets in Brooklyn's Bushwick neighborhood. But local media reports say that 2 men died after stormwater filled their basements in Brooklyn and Manhattan. Rainfall between 2.5 and 7.5 centimeters broke 3 daily precipitation records across the metropolitan area. The Office of Emergency Management issued flash flood warnings for Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, and Manhattan, asking residents to avoid flooded roads and move to higher ground. According to the National Weather Service, a wind advisory remains in effect until this evening, with gusts of up to 50 miles per hour. Away from the weather now, let's check out politics in the United States, as U.S. Senate has now voted to terminate President Donald Trump's national emergency declaration used to impose global import tariffs. The joint resolution passed by a vote of 51 to 47, marking the 3rd rebuke of the president's trade policy week. Well, before that vote, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer also criticized the new trade deal with China as bowing down to Beijing, saying that it will only bring nothing beneficial for American trade. The Trump-Xi talks, which happened earlier, that's on Thursday this week, resulted in the U.S. cutting the fentanyl tariff on China from 20% to 10%, but it left AI chips and rare earth exports unresolved. The Senate standoff is coming amid month-long government shutdown ahead of next year's midterm elections.
In the middle of the second longest government shutdown in American history, Donald Trump left the country and traveled all the way to Asia to meet President Xi. And what did he do? He bowed down to President Xi. China has called Donald Trump's bluff, and Donald Trump has folded, leaving American families and farmers and small businesses to deal with the wreckage from his blunders, from his erratic, on-again, off-again tariff policies. Americans, beware. Trump will spend the next few days trying to spin the so-called agreement as a win for America. But that is total bull. Don't believe Trump. He has folded to China. Donald Trump caved to China in Busan. The so-called deal has left us no better off than we were before Donald Trump's trade war began. If anything, things are worse. Prices have gone up. China has agreed to nothing of substance that will improve trade between our nations. On soybeans, this has been a total capitulation. Donald Trump's trade war has decimated soybean farmers in the U.S., and this year, he's saying, isn't it great, they'll buy half the soybeans, China will, that they bought last year, so many farmers are suffering. And Trump is handing out American-made technology like it's Halloween candy straight into the hands of our biggest rival. In the past, China's been desperate to get this technology, but now they don't have to worry. Trump's just giving it away. With these chips that China now doesn't have and can't make themselves, China will dominate AI in a few years, and it will have severe consequences for America and for the world. When it comes to chips, Donald Trump, it's not America first. For you, it's China first. So you can have some picture that celebrates a so-called agreement that actually hurts us. America will regret the move of sending these chips to China for generations. We will come in second on AI if this continues to happen. They will set the rules of the road. America's greatness will diminish, all because Trump wanted to claim a false victory and brag that he got a deal with Xi.
But it's hard to believe we've now reached the 30th day of this completely pointless, profoundly dumb government shutdown at the hand of Senate Democrats. Senate Democrats have now voted 13 times to keep the government shut down, blocking the continuing resolution that has been passed by the House of Representatives weeks ago. That is the key to unlock the door to this government shutdown. We're nearing a full month of that shutdown, a shutdown in search of a rationale. My suggestion is to our friends across the aisle that they need to look in the mirror and listen to their own people.
To other stories, India has confirmed that several companies have received licenses to import rare earth magnets from China. The Ministry of External Affairs says the licenses were issued to firms for the first time since Beijing imposed export controls in April this year. The restrictions have been paused for 1 year under one trade deal between the U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping, announced in South Korea. India also secured a 6-month U.S. waiver from sanctions on the strategic project on Iran, which is a move seen as diplomatic win for New Delhi. The $370 million project is aimed at boosting regional connectivity through the Indian-operated port.
We confirm that some Indian companies have received licenses for importing rare earth magnets from China. As far as the question of the latest talks and relaxations that have happened between US and China as to how it's going to play into our domain that I will come back to you. We have to yet to look at. I am not aware of the technicalities, but we will come back to you. But I do confirm that Indian companies have received licenses for importing rare earths from China. India-US relations is a comprehensive global strategic partnership. We remain engaged with both countries to continue to strengthen it further. On the trade, India-US bilateral trade that we are engaged in, we continue to remain engaged with the US side to conclude a trade deal, and these discussions are continuing. I can confirm that we have been granted exemption for a 6 months period on the sanctions that were applicable, American sanctions that were applicable on Chabahar. Regarding US sanctions on Russian oil companies, we are studying the implications of these sanctions. As we have said this before also, our decisions that we take naturally take into account the evolving dynamics that is there in the market, global market. Our position on the larger question of energy sourcing is well known to you. In this endeavor, we are guided by the imperative to secure affordable energy from diverse sources for meeting the energy security requirements and needs of 1.4 billion people. We are studying the implications of the American sanctions on Russian oil companies. So we'll have to wait. We'll have to make an assessment on our own as to what sort of implications they are going to have on us.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has announced the lowest refugee admission cap in the country's history, limiting entry to just 7,500 people for the fiscal year 2026. In a presidential document published, the Trump administration indicates that the U.S. refugee system will remain largely closed to the millions of people around the world fleeing unsafe conditions. Instead, priority for the 7,500 available slots will be given to white Afrikaners from South Africa. The filings also indicate that the President Trump administration will narrow the groups that handle refugee services moving forward. Romania's defense ministry said earlier this week that some U.S. troops rotated out of the country will not be replaced, as the U.S. plans to cut the number of troops stationed on NATO's eastern flank in Europe. So what does this mean for the European defense in an era of Russian aggression? For more on this, I'm being joined by DW's Arthur Sullivan. Thank you for joining us on The World Today. Now, what exactly has been announced by the U.S.?
Yeah, so this news wasn't so much announced by the US as confirmed by the US. So originating with Romania's defense minister, he said that the US had briefed it and other European NATO allies that it would be redeploying a rotating brigade of troops that has been deployed in Romania, Germany, Poland, and several other countries near NATO's eastern European flank since the invasion of Ukraine over 3.5 years ago by Russia. Now, US Army Command in Europe has since officially confirmed this news with a quite brief statement, not very detailed. Now, the exact number of troops returning to the US has not been confirmed. Some reports have suggested around 700, but others suggest it is likely to be several thousand. And the numbers have not been confirmed by the US, but it did confirm in that statement that it is redeploying the entire combat team from European service from this rotating brigade. Now, the US statement did play down the significance of this move. It said, quote, "This is not an American withdrawal from Europe or a signal of lessened commitment to NATO." And it emphasised that the decision should be seen as a reflection of its increased confidence in Europe's growing military capacity. And it also did say that it was part of a process to ensure what it called a balanced military force posture. That was an apparent reference to its long-sighted plans in the US to pivot its military commitments more towards the Asia-Pacific and also possibly towards issues at its own border and towards its recently stepped-up campaign against drug trafficking into the US.
But how can Europe actually now truly defend itself?
Well, the US statement did quite pointedly refer to Europe's increased defence and military capacity, and there is no doubt that Europe's NATO members have really stepped up their commitment to their own security over the last couple of years, mostly, it has to be said, due to the prompting and prodding of President Donald Trump. So the alliance's 32 members, the vast majority of which are European, they agreed earlier this year to increase defence spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. That's a huge increase, and many have already made major spending hikes on defence since that invasion in 2022. And just in general, Europe's posture on this issue has completely shifted. To give you a very quick example, there were reports earlier this week of the European Commission, that's the body that runs the EU, national governments and NATO formulating plans as to how Europe and their governments would use their different transit systems from rail to road to sea to collectively carry tanks and artillery across the continent in the event of war. That's kind of unthinkable planning that we wouldn't have considered a few years ago, which is now very much part of daily European agendas. But to answer that question, can Europe itself defend itself? Well, it depends from what exactly. So at the moment, one of the main issues we're seeing are these drone incursions suspected to be orchestrated by Russia, regularly disrupting European airspace. Now, those kind of threats Europe can clearly defend itself from. But were some countries on the NATO eastern flank to face the kind of aggression and war which Ukraine has, so that's a ground troop invasion, aerial bombardment every day, attacks on critical infrastructure, well, that would be a completely different picture, especially when we consider that some of these countries are much smaller than Ukraine. So Europe obviously wants the US to be there for it in such an extreme scenario, but increasingly it seems that it needs to be prepared for the possibility that it may not always be there.
Thank you very much. DW's Arthur Sullivan, thanks a lot for your time on The World Today. And still ahead on The World Today, King Charles strips Andrew of Prince title, orders him out of Windsor home. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian activists rallied outside Downing Street late on Thursday to denounce Israel's latest airstrikes on Gaza during the ongoing ceasefire. Former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accused the British government of complicity in the conflict, claiming that the United Kingdom's spy planes continued to operate over Gaza even after all Israeli hostages were released. Mr. Corbyn, who is now the co-leader of the Youth Party, has called for an independent inquiry into Britain's involvement in Israeli military operations.
I was told that the overflying has now ceased because, in their words, the purpose of the overflying has now finished because they claim it was only about finding the hostages that were held. And since the hostages have now been released, then there's no need for it. If you believe that, you believe anything.
That bombing raid killed over 100 Palestinians. Even in the most intense days of fighting in the last 2 years, that figure was over 200 Palestinians. So half as many have been killed during the ceasefire as in the most intense days of fighting over the last 2 years. Now that's not a ceasefire.
It's resumed its genocidal bombardment of the people of Gaza, and our government is seemingly content with only piecemeal sanctions on individual settlers. They're refusing to acknowledge that this is not a one-off issue, this is a structural issue with an apartheid settler colony. I mean, we're notionally in the middle of a ceasefire period that 104 Palestinians were killed in one airstrike on Gaza, making this one of the deadliest days in the history of the entire genocide over the last 2 years. So what use is a ceasefire if the Israeli state, the Israeli military, can continue to violate it?
A so-called ceasefire has seen Israel bombing hospitals, refugee camps, tents, homes. Palestinians have nowhere left to go, and yet Israel has not stopped.
And Buckingham Palace has announced that King Charles's brother Andrew will lose all his royal titles and leave his 30-room mansion in Windsor. A statement from the palace reads, Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Andrew also no longer appears on the official roll of the peerage. Dukes are now listed on this roll, which is maintained by the Crown Office. Despite being stripped of his prince title, Andrew is still 8th in line to the throne. Local media say that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor will not leave Royal Lodge immediately, but the process of giving notice, surrendering the lease, and organizing the move could stretch into the new year. Andrew's daughters, Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice, will retain their titles as they are the daughters of the son of a sovereign. The announcement comes after mounting pressure over Andrew's private life. Earlier this month, Andrew voluntarily gave up his Duke of York title. And according to state media, Andrew's personal antics have generated embarrassing headlines, testing the patience of the royal family for years now. However, it was Andrew's persistent ties to the late disgraced financier and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein that ultimately led to Andrew stepping down from his royal duties in 2019. Meanwhile, Downing Street says that Prime Minister Keir Starmer fully supports the palace's decision to strip Andrew of his titles. The Nigerians in Diaspora Commission NIDCAM is felicitating with a Nigerian-born University of Ibadan graduate, Professor Idayat Owolabi, on her historic achievement. Professor Owolabi was recently awarded the title of Commander of the British Empire in the King's Birthday Honours 2025 for her outstanding contributions to the health sector, as announced on October the 10th, 2025. The NIDCAM boss, Honorable Abike Arewa, has hailed Professor Owolabi's success as a source of immense pride for Nigerians, both at home and in the diaspora. She emphasized that recognizing such accomplishments helps reshape global perception, highlight the positive impact of Nigerians in diverse fields. Throughout her career, Professor Owolabi is said to have demonstrated professionalism and served as an exemplary ambassador for Nigeria. And congratulations are in order. And for Africa Tech this week, Africa's premier artificial intelligence and intelligent automation trade show and conference is underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. Organizers say this event connects enterprise buyers with both global and local suppliers. It also features the inaugural United Nations AI for Good Impact Africa, held under the theme, Curating a World-Class Program from Global and Local for through leaders. A South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, reports. Fortunately, we will not bring you that report, but hopefully get it done later. Thanks a lot for watching The World Today. I'm Anne Nwaudo. Have a wonderful weekend.